I was going to, the reason I'm recording this is because I was going to write a blog post. I haven't done a blog post for ages, but I do still have my blog, www.babyyou'rearichman.co.uk or .com, I can't remember, because it's been so long. I was used to saying it at the time, so I could have told you at the time when I used it, but my laptop's been broken for a few days, so I was going to write a blog post a few days ago or a week ago, I can't remember, but obviously my laptop's not working, so I haven't been able to, and I just thought now, because something occurred to me, and I was like, I'm going to write a blog post about this, and then obviously I couldn't, so I just thought I would record a quick podcast episode. It relates to the last two that I posted about dissociative identity disorders. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole that day. It's not always healthy to focus on what you think you might have had or what you think you might have and self-diagnose and all of that, because you do end up going down these rabbit holes and you feel very isolated and you get a bit obsessive and you feel like no one understands you and everyone's against you, and that's pretty much how I felt that day, some of those feelings. But then I spoke to my nurse about it, and she said it's actually on my file. It's in my file that I suffered from an identity disorder for a long period of time, and it puts stress and pressure on my brain, and that's part of what caused the psychosis. So I just found that interesting, and it completely changed the way I looked at things, because it means that I was believed and I was listened to and it was diagnosed. Essentially, if it's in my file and it was diagnosed by the doctor who treated me, which is what she said, and it was one of the first things he said to her, because at the start of my time in hospital I was going by Isabel because I felt like the name Caitlin had become redundant because it didn't feel connected to me anymore. I didn't recognise my face, and I didn't recognise my name, and I didn't recognise my family, and I didn't recognise my friends, and I didn't recognise anything because I had what I think was dissociative amnesia. So that's why I thought it was a dissociative identity disorder, because the two can often be connected. Memory loss is related to identity disorders. But I don't know if it was dissociative identity disorder or if it was just, there's many different types of identity disorders, I think. There might be like 3. I don't know. I haven't done that much research, but there are different types of identity disorders. So I don't know what type of identity disorder he diagnosed, but he apparently said she had an identity disorder and she had body dysmorphia. Those are the 2 things she mentioned. So I just thought that was really interesting and worth mentioning, because I've gone on this whole pursuit and it felt like a bit of a solo pursuit really with the identity disorder. I did the blog, I did this podcast, I wrote a book about this potential identity disorder that I thought I had that had never been diagnosed, and it turns out all this time it's been in my file. So I probably should have asked the question sooner, but I just assumed, because it's not been mentioned, that it was just, we were all just focusing on psychosis and depression, which are the 2 things that I take medication for. But I think she explained, and she said that they were the immediate problems. The identity disorder was an underlying thing, and it seemed to have ended. So it wasn't like an immediate problem to be dealt with. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting, and I wanted to talk a little bit. What occurred to me earlier that I wanted to write the blog post about was sort of what's expected of women and the ideal feminine archetype and all these things that I found damaging when I was 12, and that led to my anorexia and body dysmorphia and identity disorder. And I feel like I can talk about the identity disorder more freely now and with a little bit more authority. Not authority, what's the word? I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but like people will take it a little bit more seriously now, hopefully, and won't just think I'm spouting nonsense. So yeah, I think I took so many messages on board that I must have taken from my surroundings and the people around me and my peers, and I thought girls had to be pretty and quiet, basically, and modest. And it was modesty that I was thinking about earlier, because I think I spent so much of my life trying, even if I thought I was good at something, I would never say, oh, I'm really good at this. I would just be modest about it. And if I thought I looked pretty one day, I would never be like, you look all right. I'd complain about something to a friend. I'd be like, oh, I look so fat today or something. I think it's just innate to be that we feel like women have to be modest, and you don't. Like, you can be confident, you can be loud, you can be direct, you can be rude. Like, if a man's being it's not always the best course of action if you're trying to reject advances to be rude, because you never know how the guy might respond. Like, he could be violent or something. So I wouldn't actually recommend that. Ignore that. But as a woman, you can be anything you want to be, is what I'm trying to say. And I think a big part of my identity disorder, I've focused a lot in the things that I've talked about on appearance and how I felt like I needed to look. And obviously the anorexia was incorporated in that, and the body dysmorphia. Like, I would focus on my face and obsess over things on my face. So I've talked a lot about the appearance side of it, and the clothes that I would wear, and how I would, try and portray myself. But I've not talked as much about the personality changes, and a lot of my personality did change. I was very different when I was a child to how I became as an adolescent, and I'm very different now to how I was as an adolescent, because I've had to work on it, and I'm still not there, but every time I push myself out of my comfort zone, I grow a little bit more, and I will get there. Like, for example, I still haven't performed live. I sing and I write my songs, but I just put them on distribution platforms like Spotify and iTunes. I've not done an open mic or anything. So yeah, that's something I need to work on, and it is a goal for me. I would love to be able to do that, because it's what's expected, but then I shouldn't feel like I have to do it because it's what's expected. I can do whatever I feel comfortable with. It's so complicated, but what I'm trying to say is, for any young girls that are listening to this podcast, don't feel like you have to adhere and fit in to any standards. Just be yourself, and if you think you look good, it's all right to think that. Because sometimes I would look at myself in the mirror before the makeover and I thought I looked nice, I'd have my natural curly hair, no makeup, I was a little bit bigger, wore the baggy jumper. But I remember now standing looking in the mirror and thinking, oh, I look nice today. And I went to Boots with my mum, and I got this like yellow stuff that you put on your cheeks to cover up redness from Benefit. And I remember once I had that, I thought my face looked better. That was my first step towards wearing makeup, but I wasn't wearing full makeup then. I was just sort of covering the redness, and I remember thinking I looked better, and then I started losing weight, and it was all downhill from there, really. And it was years worth of stress and anxiety and mental illness, and it's my life, and it was the choice I made and the decisions I made that led to that. And I don't know if I would change it, but I know that if I did change it, I would have been happier if I'd just, ignored society and ignored the voices in my head, and ignored the people teasing me, and just stood firm and stayed true to myself, rather than bending and breaking and trying to fit into this mould that I thought I had to fit into. So yeah, I'll leave it there for today, because it's 9 minutes now, this podcast, and I don't want it to be too long, because a couple of the last few ones I've done have been quite long. I don't know, let me know if anyone's listening, if anyone actually listens to these, let me know if you prefer longer or shorter podcast episodes, and if you'd prefer music in them or just talking, advice, if you prefer them to be about mental illness or just the identity disorder, or what. Just let me know what you like. Thank you for listening. I'll